Chapter 13. Yahushua and the 12 worked with the fishermen and on ships bringing goods from all parts of the world, even from the cities beyond. And during this time, he did not draw attention to himself. Then one day, while in the part of Tyre called the Place of Purple, he came upon two men in argument among several others. He said to them, "No disagreement can be settled justly by blows, while loud words confuse the issue. If your brother does wrong, reprove him quietly, but let it be between you two alone. If the matter cannot be settled between you, then seek two men acceptable to both, and let them decide the issue." By the time Yahushua had dealt with this matter, a crowd had gathered, and someone in it called out, "Master, come with me to my brother, and tell him that the estate left by our father should be shared with me." Yahushua called him forward and said, "I am a teacher. No man has given me authority to decide such matters. When things are done properly, there is less likelihood of repercussions." Then Yahushua turned to the gathering and said, "Take care always to guard against all kinds of greed and acquisitiveness, for no man's happiness can be assured by his possessions. In fact, much wealth is the father of sleepless nights." There was a certain rich man whose fields were fertile, yielding heavy crops. Seeing the bounty of the land, he decided there was insufficient space to store it and had his barns and storehouses pulled down so bigger ones could be erected. Into these he stacked everything until the new buildings were packed full. When this was completed, he relaxed, saying to himself, "Now I have ample laid up for all my future needs and can eat, drink and enjoy my good fortune." But that night he was called to his accounting in another life, and no part of his worldly goods could be taken. Now, who benefited by all he had accumulated? This is how it is with those who accumulate worldly wealth but remain spiritual paupers. Yahushua then turned to two of the 12 who stood beside him and said, "This is why I tell you not to unduly concern yourselves with food and clothing. There is so much more to life than eating, and the body requires more than clothes. Look at the wild birds, which live happily from day to day, and learn from them. Have no doubts, my friends, for you are certainly heirs to glory, with an unassailable treasure house in heaven. Be prepared for whatever comes, your clothes fitting the occasion and your lamp lit, like servants awaiting the master's return from visiting, ready to open the door immediately. The master is gratified on finding his servants anticipating his arrival and does not fail to reward them. Thieves keep clear of houses where the owners have made provision for their coming, but go in search of those unguarded or where the occupants sleep. Therefore, always hold yourself in readiness, for you never know from day to day what will eventuate." Kepha said, "Master, is this meant for us, or does it apply to everyone?" Yahushua answered, "Who does the master choose to fill a position of trust? Is it not the man who works diligently though not under the eye of the master? I can assure you this is the man who will be promoted. If, however, the man in whom trust is vested thinks, 'I am not being observed by the master,' and gets drunk, or is careless about what is done, be sure the master will catch him out. Any servant who knows what to do but fails to do it should not go unchastised, but those who do not know what is expected of them cannot be justly criticized. From the man who is given much responsibility, much will be expected, for the greater the trust placed in a man, the greater should be the return." A man in the crowd said to Yahushua, "We have heard of your teachings and that you herald the rule of Elohim. Tell us about this." Yahushua said, "There is the kingdom of the ruach and the kingdom of the flesh. Yahweh rules the first himself, but the second he rules through his viceroy man. But man tries to set himself up as an independent ruler, making his own laws and setting aside those of his sovereign. When the viceroy ceases to rebel and governs in accord with the decrees of the sovereign, that will be the rule of Elohim." The man said, "This teaching is beyond our understanding. We have the Torah which comes from the mouthpieces of Elohim." Yahushua said, "Of course you have the Torah, but it is either disobeyed, ignored or circumvented. Therefore, it is nullified and rendered ineffective. I have come to gather the lost sheep, bringing them back into the fold, which is the will of Yahweh. I have come to cleanse the earth with purifying fire. But though I have struck the sparks, the tinder is not yet ignited. I travel a stony road, but the greatest ordeal lies ahead. You may think in your hearts that I come to bring peace to the earth and concord among men, and this is true, for such will be under the rule of Elohim. However, before this comes about, those who oppose it must be defeated. Therefore, I come to arm those who are loyal to the cause, to put a sword into the hands of men and stinging words on the tongues of women. Henceforth, families will be divided against themselves, and brother will be separated from brother, and father set against son. Some in the crowd said among themselves, "These words we can understand. Truly this is the one promised who will deliver us from our oppressors." Yahushua said, "Bide your time, and all things will be made clear." A scribe in the crowd said, "It seems you speak with hidden meanings. How are we to interpret these teachings?" Yahushua said, "You are so accustomed to devious thinking, trying to make a yes into a no to suit your convenience, that when given truth you pull it apart, seeking to find something else behind it. Unless you accept these things as would a child, you cannot hope to enter the kingdom of Yahweh. When you see clouds coming in from the west, you say, 'Soon there will be rain,' and this forecast proves to be correct. When the south wind blows, you say, 'It will be extremely hot,' and again your prediction is right. What hypocrites you are, so quick to interpret some signs while closing your eyes to others less to your liking. You can interpret the omens in earth and sky, but close your eyes to those indicating present trends." Someone in the crowd said, "We have the failings of men. Should we be condemned for these?" Yahushua replied, "As sons of Yahweh, you inherit his substance and are heirs to glory. Think less of earthly weaknesses and more of godly strength." Another in the crowd asked Yahushua about unjustified suffering, and might not his cause bring this upon the heads of his followers? Someone else said, "What about the Galileans who died in resisting the efforts of Pilate to appropriate the temple offerings so he could bring water to the city of Jerusalem?" Yahushua said, "The Galileans and the governor did right in their own eyes, the former seeking to serve Elohim, and the latter, men. But these things are not matters to be placed at issue, for whoever serves one serves the other, and there is no clash of interests. Can you believe that the Galileans who suffered as they did were worse than others in Galilee? This is not so. They suffered for no wrongdoing, but through misguidance. Calamity strikes capriciously. Do you think those who died when the tower fell on them at Siloam deserve death more than the others? Life is full of uncertainties, so men must be made aware of the need for repentance, knowing the day of assessment may be near or far. Be sure of one thing, there will be no discrimination among you on the assessment day. All will get their fitting reward." Then one in the crowd shouted, "Tell us about the kingdom of heaven, for surely if we are going there, it is well to know what it is like." Yahushua said, "If you were going to a distant city, which would be most beneficial, a description of it, or details concerning the route? Then too, is it not important to prepare for your reception? For if a man residing in a palace described the place, this serves no purpose to one who will have to beg for scraps and sleep in the gutters. The road to heaven may be likened to 10 young women who, taking lamps, went out to meet a bridegroom, 5 being irresponsible, and 5 reliable by nature. The irresponsible ones left everything to the last minute and snatched up their lamps, forgetting the oil containers were not filled. Because the bridegroom was delayed, all the young women lay down to sleep. But at midnight there was a shout to say the bridegroom was coming and to go out and meet him. The young women all arose and trimmed their lamps. But the irresponsible ones, finding theirs going out, said to the others, 'Let us have some of your oil, for we forgot to fill the containers.' The others replied, 'We cannot do this, for we do not have enough oil for all. And if we share with you, there will be insufficient to light the way. It is better we provide light all the way with 5 lamps than we all provide light for just a short distance.' The irresponsible ones hastened to the oil vendor, but he would not serve them. And while they were away, the bridegroom arrived. And those who were ready lighted his way and joined the guests at the wedding, the doors then being closed. Later, when the irresponsible ones returned and stood outside shouting to be let in, the doorkeeper said, "Who are you? What purpose do you serve? Go away. Therefore, I say to you, be always alert, your spiritual lamps trimmed and filled with the oil which gives eternal light. For you never know the hour when you will be called." They who stood about Yahushua asked, "Who is chosen to enter heaven, and how is the selection made?" Yahushua explained in this manner: a king decided to collect all debts due and ordered those who owed money to come before him. One of these was so heavily indebted that he was in no position to repay, so the king ordered that he be sold into slavery to satisfy the debt. The debtor begged the king to be patient, saying that, given time, every last farthing would be paid. The king, taking pity on him, released the debtor from his obligations. A few days afterwards, the king's debtor met a poor man who owed him just a small amount. And the king's debtor took hold of him and said, "Repay the money due to me at once, for I have no patience with defaulters." The poor man begged him to be patient, saying that, given time, he would repay in full. But the other would not have it, and had the poor man committed to prison. The poor man's friends reported the matter to the king, who had his debtor brought before him. And he said, "You villain, because you pleaded with me to have pity, I released you from the whole of your debt. Had I not done so, you would have thought me harsh. Yet what consideration have you shown?" Then the king condemned the man to severe punishment until the whole of the debt was paid. In this manner men are chosen for heaven. And therefore I say very earnestly, deal with others as you would be dealt with, not holding one Torah in your heart for yourself and letting another issue from your lips for others. Prepare yourselves for entry into heaven, for this can only be done here and is the purpose of earth. Do not think that, because you are not immediately chastised, your iniquities are overlooked. A sower went out into his grain field and sowed with good seed. But during the night, an enemy came and strewed wheat like weeds over the ground and went away. After the wheat blades had sprouted and the stalks began to form wheat heads, the weeds among them were revealed. Then the field laborer went to the landholder and said, "The field was sown with good seed, and yet it is now full of weeds. Shall we go and pull them up?" The landholder answered, "Someone who wishes to harm me has done this. But in pulling up the weeds you may do more damage. Let both grow together until harvesting time. Then the reapers can separate the weeds from the wheat, stacking the weeds for burning, and gathering the wheat into the granary. Therefore, because transgressors go unpunished here, do not think they are overlooked or that there is not a day of accounting. Not a single deed or thought, whether it be good or bad, is overlooked." One in the crowd said, "But our thoughts harm no one." Yahushua replied, "Only yourself, for thoughts mold, strengthening or weakening the ruach. Is it not written, the nature of man is formed according to his thoughts?" Yahushua was asked, "What then is the ruach? For the holy books do not make this clear." He replied, "The ruach of man may be likened to a date seed planted in the darkness of the ground, giving no indication to anyone, not knowing its nature of what it will become. When the tree springing from it is full grown, it spreads out in the sunshine, a haven for birds and a source of pleasure for men. Or it may be likened to leaven which a woman places in a bushel of flour. There it spreads throughout the whole to change its nature. It is like a treasure buried in waste ground. The plot had no value until it was rumored that a treasure was there. Then men bid against each other to obtain it. While within the egg, a chick is self-sustaining, but once the shell is broken, it must be fed. So it is with the ruach of man and the ruach hakodesh. I assure you that every plant not nourished by the waters of life will wither and die." Several in the crowd said, "Tell us again about those who enter the kingdom of heaven." Yahusha replied with these parables. Admittance may be likened to a wedding feast prepared by a king for his son. He dispatched servants, inviting many guests. But though each was told, "The feast is preparing even now. The geese and beasts are being roasted. The bread is in the ovens, and there is wine on the tables," yet those invited ignored the messengers, saying they were too busy with their own affairs, while they abused or even ill-treated them. When this came to the ears of the king, he sent soldiers to take those who had ill-treated his messengers and confined them in dismal dungeons. The king then said to his servants, "Though I prepared a sumptuous feast, those I invited were unworthy of the honor I paid them. Go out again and invite any who will come." The servants went out into the streets, returning with many persons. However, while they were all seated at the table, the king noticed one who behaved badly, using lewd language to those beside him. The king called 2 servants and bid them take the man and throw him into the dungeons with the others. But to make sure, he went to one where there was the most filth so he would be in his own element. I have said before, though many are invited, few are chosen. Now I say, many choose not to come. There is another way for separating the wheat from the chaff, illustrated by this parable. A man left for a distant country, but before departing he called his servants to him and entrusted him with his store of gold. To one he gave 3 bars of gold, to another 2 bars, and to another 1 bar, each receiving gold in accordance with his capabilities. The servant who received 3 bars of gold went and exchanged these for silver, spending this in pleasure and high living, thinking that with all the silver he could have a really good time. The servant who received 2 bars was a cautious man, and he buried his gold in a safe place, for he thought it best not to take chances with it. The servant who had received 1 bar went and bought goods which he resold, and by this and other efforts he obtained another gold bar, for he thought to himself, "As the master did not think me as capable as the others, I must prove I am." When the master returned, he called his servants for an accounting, and the one who had received 3 bars of gold said, "Good master, with so much wealth I could not resist temptation and spend it enjoying myself, never thinking about the day of accounting." The master said, "You are an untrustworthy scoundrel," and he placed him in bondage until the whole of the value was repaid. The man who had received 2 bars of gold said, "Master, I knew you were a hard man and was afraid to take any risks, so I safeguarded the gold. Here it is." The master said, "You have been neither good nor bad, but took your ease while I was away. Go about your job, but expect no promotion." The man who received 1 bar of gold said, "Having only 1 bar, I increased it to 2, for I knew you would need gold on your return and have been a good master." To this one the man said, "Well done. You have proved worthy of my trust. One will now place you in charge of my treasury." One of the people gathered about Yahusha said, "How should I treat my servants? For I have one who is troublesome, though perhaps it is his youth." Yahusha then told this parable. A man had a garden plot set aside for vines, but a self-planted fig tree grew among them. In the fruiting season, the man came to this plot accompanied by his gardener, who said, "This fig tree is interfering with the vines. If it fruited, it might not matter. But as it does not, would it be best to cut it down? For it is only taking goodness from the soil, which could be used more profitably by the vines." The man said, "Leave it for another season, but give it a little attention. Then if it fails to fruit next season, cut it down. I like figs, but a new cutting might take a long time to mature. And this tree, having chosen its own situation, may yet prove more profitable in this plot than the vines." Yahusha said, "If a fig tree grows among vines, it can be left, for both produce good fruit. But if it grows among thorns, then these are cut down and the fig tree left on its own. If a man hires 3 laborers for his vineyard and there is work only for 2, he dismisses the one least worthy of his hire. Yet everyone who labors must be paid his due. But if one pour less than full measure into the task, he cheats no less than one who deceives at the weighing. Some self-righteous people who picked pieces out of the Torah to suit their convenience as a child picked segments from a pomegranate and lived by these ridiculed Yehusha. But he said to them, "You who try to impress others with your righteousness are hypocrites, but what goes on in your minds is not overlooked. Admiration and popularity may benefit you in this world but count for nothing in the world to come, unless worthily earned. I come to herald the rule of Elohim when such as you will be swept aside by those who serve his cause." Some in the crowd shouted, "Who will you take to serve it?" Yehusha replied, "When the trumpets sound the rallying call and 2 men are reaping in a field, one will be taken and the other ignored. 2 scribes will be writing in a room, one will be taken and the other ignored. 2 women will be grinding corn, one will be taken and the other ignored." Someone said, "Where will they be taken?" Yehusha answered, "Vultures gather where the carcass lies and bees where the flowers grow. Flies are drawn to stinking meat. Brave men converge on the battlefield, while cowards seek their hideouts. The day of decision will come like a roll of thunder, and on that day, those serving the cause of Yahweh will be separated from those who serve the powers of darkness." There were many other parables which Yehusha used in this place, to bring understanding to the people. He taught simply so all could grasp what he said, but afterwards, when alone with the 12, he explained things differently, revealing a deeper meaning.